Hi, this is Off to Battle, and I'm doing a video on the rewards of Dread, and I'm covering everything except the favor shop because you actually use Dread to purchase this stuff, which makes it different. So, I've seen a YouTube video that said never spend Dread on these units. This advice is wrong, and for Kazrak it is very wrong, and I'm going to address why really briefly. But take Ungor Spearman Herd with shields. Compared to your basic Ungor Spearman Herd, they are better in exactly three ways. One, they have a more favorable attack interval. They attack faster. Two, they have shields, duh. Three, they have higher melee defense. So for these three reasons, they are far superior to your basic unit. So you'd love to have these doing your spearman jobs inside every single army, or at least until you have something really good that's also anti-large, but maybe doesn't do the exact same thing. And aside from one regiment of renown, you're basically looking at miniatures of the great weapons or something. Nothing else in the roster really does this job. I mean, as well as the Ungor Spearman Herd with shields. Now, the Ungor Herd, you can replace these with later infantry very, very easily, and you should. But here's the thing about these sorts of caps. And yes, when you raise the cap, the cost goes up by a bit. It doesn't go up by a huge amount. I mean, that went from 100 to 116. This is with Kazrak, so everything you see has a 15% discount. So, going from 6 to 8, this applies to both sides. So that means that, whereas before I clicked, I could have had up to 6 of these and 6 of these, I can now have up to 8 of these, 8 of these. That's what it means. So one click, 4 units. And again, both of these are upgrades over your basic Ungor Spearman. It's just that this does a different job. This will harass Empire Spearmen, Empire Halberdiers. It will slip in to attack archers in melee. It will do guerrilla actions because it has stock. It will target artillery. It can do a bunch of things. It will not do them as fast as, let's say, Chaos Warhounds. But Chaos Warhounds do not have stock unless you've got a Kazrak army that's very well built. I mean, it has the capstone of his personal skill line. Speaking of, Chaos Warhounds with poison, obviously they have poison, but that's the only thing that they have that's different from the basic version. The basic version will still do everything that this can, except inflict poison. On the other hand, poison is really good for what it's trying to do. If you're attacking, let's say, Empire Pistoliers, very easy example. The Pistoliers will be moving at 85% of their normal speed rather than 100% because they've been poisoned. This is very good because the Chaos Warhounds will pick them apart. They are soft targets, therefore the low armor piercing of the unit makes it very easy for this unit to inflict damage, and they want to run away, so they're not going to be trying to fight. So complete advantage belongs to you. Razorgore Herd, they are large, and that means that unlike the Chaos Warhounds and unlike these units, Spearmen will do extra damage to these. So it doesn't take much to give them a lot of problems. They also have, if you try to get them through slender places like gates and whatever, they might go to 2 columns trying to fit through stuff. So their 32 models would be 16 model columns side by side, 2 by 2 like it's going into Noah's Ark. So that can get finicky. But you line them up, spread out, and you crash them into a target. They have high charge bonus, they have armor piercing, yes, they have rampage. In the right build, they will do lots of stuff. But it takes effort, it takes boosting. But they're cheap. You press this, 150 dread at this point, and I will be able to get a maximum of 6 Razorgore Herd and 6 Chaos Warhounds with poison, if I have the proper buildings. The proper buildings are cheap, and they're easy to get. So these are things to consider. Because you don't always have a well-built army. You sometimes have to recover from being defeated, from having your lords wounded, or having to recruit fresh lords altogether. So being able to access these units earlier, it does help. And Razorgore Herd would do something completely different from any kind of warhound like this. So they're just different roles, or you use them in the same roles and they have slightly different effects. There's less of these, but they inflict a higher amount of charge bonus damage, and their armor piercing, obviously. So, in this case, you only have an increase of 1 per click. So 1 Feral Manticore extra, 1 Harpy extra. Harpies are another unit that can get boosted by a lot to a pretty silly degree, but that depends on your lord. Kazrak or Malagor preferably, But the thing is, having one flying unit that can go do a deep dive against 1 or 2 mortar units or field trebuchets in a siege against Bretonia, things like that, it can be a massive, massive advantage. So having 1 or having 2, that's okay. Having 10 might not be what you want or need. But on the other hand, Feral Manticores are underrated. They may rampage, but this will 1v1 a Huntsman General, and the speed at which it flies will get it in to do that melee damage and just, scrape and claw and just rip one apart with relative ease. Because it's great at damaging soft targets. And by soft, I mean anything with 50 armor or below will probably have a very, very hard time with 1 Feral Manticore. Sending 2 or 3 and a lot gets done. Chariots are great, but in terms of the unit caps, this is 300 Dread with 2 unlocked, and 1 click would allow me to go from 2 Razor Gore Chariots maximum in the entire force, the entire faction, to 3. But also I'd get 1 of Tusk Gore Chariots thrown in as a bonus, and then I could get 3 of these maximum. So that's great. Gore Herd. This goes back to the earlier levels, because it's a high Dread cost, but every time I click this, I will get 2 of each. So I will go from being able to access 2 of these and 2 of these to being able to get 4 of these and 4 of these. And then 1 more click and I'll get 6 of these and 6 of these, maximum across the entire faction. Which is good. These are very good general infantry units. They're fast, they're vicious. This is more of a Berserker infantry axe unit. This one is, well, it has the shields, it has less offensive power, but it has more defensive power, and is much better protected against missiles. So relatively speaking, if you're fighting archer spam, you want this to go in first. You want this to go in the flanks, or hitting any kind of halberdier unit, because ideally you want to fight halberdiers with something that does high base damage, which is not armored itself, and save your armored units for something that's not inflicting armor piercing back at you. Tzaangors. These only go up by 1 each click. So each time you purchase with 340 Dread this time, and if I press it, it'll go up to 400. Now I can get 2 Tzaangors in my entire faction. On the other hand, Tzaangors, these shields are silver grade shields. They will block 55% of small missile fire, and the unit inflicts magical attacks. So any kind of ethereal unit, any kind of Karn Wraith units, let's say, if you're fighting vampire counts, these will be especially good against. They are not anti-large, but they are pretty heavily armored, so that gives you a lot of advantages and disadvantages. It's worth having a bunch of these, but it's just expensive compared to some things. Centaurs are a big deal, and that's because each time you increase the cap, now I can get 3 Centaurs with throwing axes, 3 Centaurs with great weapons, and 3 Centaurs with shields, if you're wondering what makes them special. So Centaurs are great for filling your armies with speed, and that's what you should see this as. You're being able to replace some other things. Centaurs with throwing axes can be a complete replacement for Ungor Raiders. Ungor Raiders, you need shield walls for them to use them well, and they're not very good at armor piercing. These are exceptional at armor piercing, and the Ungor Raider does not have much more of range than the Centaurs with throwing axes. And these you can do hit and run attacks, all kind of crazy skirmishing with them. So in the mid to late game, you really want these. And like I said, you increase the cap and you get 1 of each every time. Now these are recruited from the same building, the second tier of the building you get your chariots from. You can get these with Tusk Gore Chariots. But from the 3rd level, you get Razor Gore Chariots, and you also get Centaurs with throwing axes. So if you don't have level 3 of that building, you can only get these 2 and Tuskors. But on the other hand, these are good. So you want them. So there's nothing wrong with starting out with what you can and then eventually spreading out. But if you have spare Dread and you want to fill out your armies with more advanced units, you're not doing a bad thing by getting Centaurs. Giants, here's the thing. You can recruit a Giant from a Tier 3 settlement building. You cannot increase the slots that you can use to recruit beyond 2. So you can only recruit 2 Giants at a time from a level 3 settlement or above, and that's fine. Because if you have armies to spare and time to wait, having a couple of Giants in one army These are great at smacking around lords. These are great at fighting blobs. These are great at anything where the enemy is not focused against them, because they have 12,000 hit points. It's a lot. I mean, I'm saying on Ultra, but they have 12,000 hit points on Ultra. You have to focus to kill a giant. Usually armies aren't focused on killing giants. They're trying to kill lords. They're trying to kill elite infantry. They're trying to kill missile units. The giants are usually left alone. And if they're left alone, then they just pick out the most armored opponent within reach and just smack it. And they're good at that. Chaos Spawn are basically your bonus, because you press this, you get one of each. So you can get one giant and one Chaos Spawn per increase in the cap. And it's not a cheap one. So for this, you get the giant, which is the main thing. The Chaos Spawn can be used as a complete replacement for something like Ungor Hurt, or even Gore Hurt. Unless you're fighting halberdiers specifically, and even if you are, like, you'll take damage, but you'll also inflict it. These are very lightly armored, but they also have poison in this roster, the Beastmen roster. So they're actually not bad. They do take lots of damage. You're not necessarily going to lose models until late in the fight, and then you will, but you would anyway. You fight, you take damage. The point is that they can actually do incredible damage in turn against target. Like, they can do within the same amount of time. Much, much more damage than Ungor Herd, much more damage than these guys. They are damage dealer units. Any kind of Minotaur, these are fantastic units for the roster. The initial Minotaurs are okay, and they can become incredible. I mean, you stick one of these banners of Gork on them, and they become true berserkers. But without text and without other support, they have like 5 armor after that. Their melee attack still goes up to like 80, and their weapon strength goes up to something like 183 armor piercing. I mean, mainly armor piercing, like 183 with 16 models on Ultra. It's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. The giant, without any help, inflicts 700 weapon damage, 500 AP as a single entity. If you have these guys doing 183 per hit each, it gets crazy. So, double-edged swords, but the Beastmen love inflicting damage, especially in ambush situations, which they do a lot. These are still very fast units. I'd love to put the Mantle of Gorok on a Minotaurs with Shields unit, but late game, when you're facing lots of monsters, it's the great weapons that you really, really want. Here's the thing, every time you click on one of these, it increases the cap for that variant only by 1. So these are expensive. It varies. If you've got Taurox, this gets easier, but they're expensive. Now, obviously, the single entity ones are expensive. Jabber Slice, Incarnate Elemental of Beasts, Tzaangor, Gorgon. These each have their uses. This is the capstone anti-infantry, all-around, just symbol of death. You have the Aura of Madness, that low infantry units that are low leadership units, because they're terrorized by this thing, they are taking direct damage in a radius. And the unit also inflicts poison. It's just a great unit to have. I mean, this can bolster any kind of army to incredible heights just by existing. Just like having a lord with this, the Banner of Madness, which I highly recommend for Khazrak and Malagor, and it should be pretty useful for others too, but especially those. So, Incarnate Elemental, it's pretty much the same idea, except in melee, it's actually an anti-large unit, but it has the Everlasting Flock of Doom thing going. So, without the same conditions as the Jabberslith, it will have its own Morris Engine effect. And that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just not as beefy as the Giant, and people will see it as, AI will see it as a greater threat and will try to kill it faster, which is a smart call, but it's not that squishy either. So if you protect it even a little bit, and also, this hides in force and this does not. That's crazy. Because this has a massive, like, 9,000 or something. It's nuts. Tzaangors, usually people will settle for summoning them, but if you actually use up a lot of their ammo, they can really rack up the damage, and they are very, very disruptive. It's just extremely difficult for an enemy to ignore even a single summoned Tzaangor, so they will charge at you. You can trap armies that are comfortable in high ground just from having Tzaangors. So it gives you a capability that you would not otherwise have. Gorgons, the difference between them and Giants is that they are more accurate in melee against a large target, so if they're fighting giants, they will hit more often. And the other thing is that they regenerate, so they're fast. They're a lot faster than the giant. So these are the advantages. They are hunters. They are not frontline combatants in the same way that the giant will just reinforce a line and give it far, far more mass and punching power. So the Gorgon will go and hunt down a very specific monster that may be pummeling you from far, or a lord, or just helping out for key fights. Now, the last one I'm covering, purely because I've increased the cap a few times, and look what this has gone up to. This is with Kazrak's 15% bonus reduction to cost. The Bestigor Herd. It is very hard to make a Doom stack out of these because the cost is so high. But these are basically Chaos Warriors with Frenzy. Primal Fury isn't exactly the same as Frenzy, but unbuffed, these are still really powerful. They take up space, they are armored, they are anti-armor, armor-piercing. And they're just good in every way, as long as you can actually get them to the fight. And that's the key. They are not your fastest unit. But in a Dark Alley, these are the ones to fear over basically, most of the roster. Chaos Spawn, maybe Giant, definitely in a Dark Alley you wouldn't want. Minotaurs, it depends on what kind of unit is in the matchup. These you wouldn't want to meet on a Dark Alley. Bestigors can just fill a back street and just say, you will not pass, and you're not going to. Not easily. Very hard to get around. Very hard to get through. So the point is that these will start, just because of the space that they take up, they will replace larger amounts of other units. And you can devote more of your army to things that aren't infantry for smacking things like halberdiers. Because that is something that you need to have countered if you want to make use of these units. If you want to make use of these units, you want halberdiers to die. Also chariots. So, definitely a place for the Bestigor Herd, but you just have to be very wary that you only get one extra one if you click on this and get the higher cap. But on the other hand, they're very good. So, Lords and Heroes... Okay, I'm going to take a moment and go to the actual campaign. This is what happened. I had Morgur over... I had space in my faction to recruit Morgur. I had 3 armies. I had a cap of 4 at the time that I clicked on the Confederation button. So what I did, I had him causing trouble over with the Wood Elves. And they finally caught up to him, and they destroyed his army. And I got Morgur wounded. And I got Morgur back by the start of the next turn. This would not happen if I disbanded him. If I disbanded him, he would have to wait a normal amount of time to recover from wounds. That's not fun. And also, I can't use Replace General with Morgur. There has to be... Let's see here. Because I have 3 out of 4 armies, I can recruit him. Hi, Morgur. Long time no see. That works. It would not have worked if I'd had 4 armies out of 4. I couldn't replace a general with him. So be wary of that sort of thing when you're trying to confederate. But if you have room in your army caps and you don't have a lot going on, or you don't need an extra army. Like, once I had these 3 armies with Kazrak, I was like, okay, I can do something else. Or I can at least get Morgur to cause trouble, and then, if he gets wounded by an enemy, not by me, by an enemy, then I can get him up here, and I can start doing more stuff here. And that's exactly how it played out. So have a plan when you're doing that sort of thing. So, and this is a Kazrak campaign. If I get Taurox, he will not have his special Juggernaut mechanics, but on the other hand, he'll be much better at ambushing, which is going to be ridiculous in its own sense, but he's still strong. He can still fight like Taurox. And he can still give Gore Greed to Minotaurs in his army, so that's something to keep aware of. So, beyond this, you have the same situation with heroes that, here I actually have 1 Gore Bull that I managed to save from Morgur's army, before that army got annihilated by Durthu, actually. Durthu. So, I clicked once. It didn't go up. I click again. It went up to 550. 550 is not that much. So it's going to take a while for the costs to get what you'd even start thinking of as prohibitive. The heroes are all very, very good, especially the Gorbel. The Gorbel can make crazy amounts of this roster work in ways that they were never seemingly intended, but they really were. I'm just saying that you wouldn't think that you could get the kind of attack numbers that you can, but combining a Wargore and a Gorbel and having Razorgore herds with Frenzy in a Kazrak army, let's say, with plus 10 bonus versus infantry, and with a Gorbel around which has Slaughterer's Call for plus 8 melee attack, and that level 10 ability that creates an aura of plus 15 melee attack around it. So yeah, Frenzy, you have bonus versus infantry, you have plus 23 attack with a Gorbel and melee within 35 meters. These Razorgore Herd with low melee attack are going to have it in the 60s or something ridiculous like that against infantry. And stuff's going to just get shredded. Look at these guys. They are spiky jerks. They are going to shred. So you have to consider everything in terms of how it works with each other. But the rule of thumb is, if you can afford more heroes, go ahead. Compared to what you get from sacking enough cities, the hero actions are very cheap. So, damage army, damage garrison, assassinate heroes. You have your own heroes that are too numerous to stuff into your own armies efficiently. Just use them on the map. There's nothing to hold you back from doing that, except, unless you're literally broke. So here's the last bit, and this is for upgrades. Until you purchase this, you cannot, using any kind of mechanic, raise your herd stones to level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5. It will not happen, it cannot happen. Once you purchase this stuff, you can upgrade them for free. So it costs you no favor, no gold, to get you from tier 3 to tier 4 if you purchase this with Dread. So that's how that works. At 3, you can recruit Giants. At 5, you can recruit Tzaangors. At 2, you can recruit Tuskor Chariots. So even though you have only 2 slots for recruitment by the Herdstone itself, it still can give you access to stuff that that particular horde does not have access to with its own buildings. Now for this, it's just raising the default rank your lords and heroes come with, and this is all stackable. So if you have a special building like you smacked France. So here I have... Is it with that building, or is it with this one? Yeah, with this one. I want to raise this. Here, recruit rank, +4 for Brave Shamans faction wide. So once I have this, and I have this to get lords and heroes recruited at rank 5, my Brave Shamans will come in at rank 9. So that is something to consider. Over the long run, you do want this. You want this, you want this, you want this. Because lords especially, they get much, much more powerful with their levels. So if you get a Great Brave Shaman coming in at rank 15, and he can summon a Tzaangor for free, right off the bat, that's fantastic. Same principle for this. This is involved in a kind of favor cheesing. Because if you get free buildings when you recruit a non-legendary lord, and then you sell the buildings, and then you disband the lord, well, you can get an advantage for that. But they've made this fairly expensive with Dread. And this is the last one. This is for when you have Ruination level 8 to unlock this. And then you can recruit extra armies just with 1,500 gold each. That's a small amount of Dread considering. Ruination levels... This won't come up until late game, okay? Unlocks the final battle, so you cannot buy extra armies to that degree until you're ready to fight the final battle. So these are the considerations for the Dread Shop. Like I said, I think that the advice never to spend on these is just wrong. Because look at this, even for this, compare this Dread cost to what you're paying just to get one extra Jabberslide. And then look at what it costs to get another one on top of that. You can spend on several of these, and if you get the cost of skill event, and this is cut to 111 for the first click, just get a bunch. Get a bunch and don't look back. You're going to make that dread back just by playing the game and just fighting. And specifically, if you're wondering how to get more, then you want things like this building right here. Dread gain from battles 20% faction-wide. Once you start getting a bunch of these, that's a big deal. This tech also. So just by playing the game and getting into more fights and winning them, you will get Dread. You don't need to worry about it. There is no reason not to get as many of these lore units as you think may be necessary. And if they're not necessary now, if they're not necessary at a particular moment, once you lose an army, then it matters. Once you lose an army, like, poor Morgor here. Now I have these basic buildings. No, I have no movement with him right now, so I can't actually do anything with it. Wait a minute, let me get to here. Okay, right away, I could get him to build this building. Next turn, I could go here and build the building for creatures. Right away, I can get Chaos Warhounds, Harpies, Razorgore Herd. So that's 2 turns after having re-recruited Morgor. I can get them. These caps matter if you want an army that has a lot of things fast. And then you work up to this stuff. And if you lose them, you start with these again, and you work your way up. So the little stuff is not worthless, and it gets a lot better as you go, but this stuff is pretty powerful just as soon as you get them, so hey, get more. Take care, have fun.